Andrew and I are 100% committed to gearing up this coming year for both local and statewide initiatives. And I know some of you have been at this alongside us for a very long time, and some of you are brand new. And so I'm going to try and give a little bit of a mix of things today. So there'll be some basics, background that some of you might find a little old hat, and hopefully there'll be a few new things for you guys to glean. But for those of you that are newer to the tobacco prevention world or to the advocacy world, hopefully this will give you kind of a jumping off point to get started. All that being said, if you've seen kind of one campaign or one coalition or one advocacy project, I mean, you've really only seen just one. They're all very different. They're all very customizable. Your local initiative might look very, very different from somebody that's not even 50 miles away from you and what they're working on. And so just know that today will be kind of a broad base from you, like I said, for you to start from, but it by no means is meant to be comprehensive or all-inclusive or a cookie cutter format for you to follow. So I'm going to share a few slides. Some of these slides you will have seen before if you attended my coalition trainings about a year ago. Some of them are new or updated, but I just want to, let me see here. I'm going to get my screen shared real quick here, and then I'll keep talking. But this way you can see what's going on. We'll go ahead and get this up and rolling from the beginning. How about? Okay, can everybody see my screen? Abby, you're going to have to give me a verbal confirmation because I can't see face anymore. Okay, thank you.
Slides are up.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get rolling and just to go over a few of our goals and objectives for today. I'm hopefully going to give you a little bit of an understanding of the basics of project or policy-based campaigns. We're going to hopefully learn from some of you all who have done some of this work before, or maybe learn from those of you that are brand new and have questions. And then you will get a little bit of time to start taking some notes and creating your plan if you are planning to do some sort of initiative or campaign in your local community. And then we'll give you some ideas on how to put those plans into action. And then at the very end, if you want to ask some questions or dive a little deeper into customizing some of your work, or if you want to just simply plan to connect with me after this for a one-on-one counseling session or strategizing support session. We've already been doing that with several communities across the state for the past year to year and a half, and we'd be happy to do that for you too. For those of you unfamiliar, I mean, I think everybody on this call is pretty much familiar, but just in case, TFND is a statewide nonprofit. I do answer to a board of directors. They are located all across the state. This picture is already getting kind of old. So some of the people have gone on to bigger and better things maybe, but some of us are still here in the trenches with all of you. And we are planning to, kind of as a sneak preview, I guess I could say today, we are planning to bring back the annual banquet in 2025. So be staying tuned for more details on that to come. So what is a campaign? It varies on how you go about it and how you look at it, but basically it's an organized course of action to achieve a goal, or as a verb, it's to work in an organized and active way toward a particular goal. And typically they end up being political or social goals or issues that we're attempting to influence or enact. And it goes hand in hand with coalition work. And this is why I used some of the slides from my previous training, because a campaign committee and a coalition can look very, very similar. They can also be two completely separate entities. And so depending on your needs and what type of influence you need in your community or what type of insulation you need as an organization might dictate how you go about building either a campaign committee or a coalition, or a combination of the two. And a coalition at its simplest form is a group of people and or organizations that are working together to achieve a common purpose. It collaborates relationships by leveraging their strengths to push an issue forward, and it brings interested or vested parties together to expand the reach of networks and reach other advocates. And there's strength in numbers by working this way. And so campaign committees and coalitions can amplify voices and foster agreement, compromise, create unified, cohesive asks asks or directives, and they can combine resources and share expertise. And to me, that's the most important part of this whole process, is the combining of resources and sharing your expertise, because no one person can do it all, no matter how good they are or how passionate they are. It's a heavy load for any one person to carry. And by organizing in this fashion and developing out campaign committees and coalitions, you really can get a lot more done. So making a plan is a key part of a campaign committee. And to be clear, this doesn't happen overnight. And so as we kind of talk through some of these steps, I'm going to talk in kind of a frame of what I have worked on in the past. And like I said, it might be different than what you're needing or what you're working on. And that's where the customization or the one-on-one support call might come into play for you. But at its beginning, deciding first of all whether to have a campaign or a coalition or a combination of the two might be the first thing that you ask. The very next thing should be, what is the issue or purpose of it? And so for us, our most recent one was defending our indoor smoke-free air law, as you may well know, for the 2023 legislative session. And we did that through our coalition and grassroots support. For one of the locals that we've been working with this past year, they are actually forming a campaign committee because their organization and their current coalition um, needs a little distance from the issue, if you will. And so having a campaign committee specifically designed for that single issue versus the overall broad mission that a coalition often covers is more appropriate for them. And so when you're designing and thinking about a campaign committee, if you're especially wanting to insulate maybe your local public health unit from the political world of things, or maybe your hands are a little more tied because of all the different hats you wear in your job, maybe you're not solely a tobacco prevention coordinator, maybe you also perform other functions within your organization. A campaign committee dedicated toward that specific single issue is probably a better route for you to go. And so what you're going to do as you plan things out, and feel free to write things down from your perspective, and we can invite people to share later, or you can ask questions later, but you're going to want to identify your issue. So for us, it was a specific bill that we knew was coming forward that would allow for exemptions of cigar bars to be enacted back in North Dakota again. And we knew that our time frame was the 2023 legislative session. And so you'll want to define that out, whether it's a specific vote that's coming up, maybe it's a ballot, a general election ballot or a primary election ballot, maybe it's a city council meeting or a school board meeting or something to that effect. But what is the date that is kind of written in the sand that will dictate your time frame? When will a decision need to be made on your issue or policy? And then you need to start thinking about who you want to invite around your table. Do you already have community champions? Do you already have a relevant coalition that you can pull people from, or that you can invite the entire coalition to work alongside you or partner or collaborate with you? But if you're looking in terms of forming a true campaign committee, you might want to have a campaign chair. That is your end all be all champion, who's the most passionate about this issue, who's dedicated to helping drive this home. And you really sit down with them and do some of this planning side by side, at least initially, to see who they might already know that could sit around the table, or who they're connected with that they'd like to work with or collaborate with. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing it right, you probably will be spending a fair amount of time with these people, and you want to know, one, that they are vested and interested, and two, that maybe they're people you like to be around. Some of this work is exhausting, but it can also be fun and rewarding. And so you can use that as you're filling the seats around your table, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail in just a little bit here. But you're also going to want to define out how you assign your roles and responsibilities. And so whether you follow a very formal format where you enact Robert's Rules of Order, and you have a chair and a vice chair and a secretary and a treasurer, and really go very formal, or if it's more loosely based, you'll want to decide that fairly early on, because as you decide who is going to fulfill what role and what responsibility. Some of that might be dictated by the type of coalition or type of campaign committee structure you decide to use. But roles and responsibilities we'll talk a bit more about in detail as well, but you can already start thinking about the broader terms of things. Who will be your ultimate spokesperson? Will that be the campaign chair? Will there be other people on the committee that are coached and trained on how to talk to the general public, how to talk to the media, how to talk to other organizations or coalitions, how to talk to young people or school-aged youth, and really figure out what those roles look like and how much time investment they might require so that you can be very upfront with people as you're asking them to step into those spots. What types of activities will you plan? This is where you can start to have some fun if you want. You can do a lot of different community outreach activities that can generate a lot of earned media or excitement around young people in particular. We've done some of that with our Break for Youth Action Summits and the activities that we ask the young people to do during and after those summits. And so really being clear on what is going to get you guys the most attention and move your issue forward the fastest, while also considering what is achievable and manageable for your volunteers, because most of the people sitting on your campaign committee are going to be volunteers. They're not going to be paid to do this work. And so you want bite-sized achievable goals and projects that they can confidently complete, whether that's getting 25 signature cards filled out supporting your issue per person, or having someone commit to helping manage your Facebook page or social media page, for 1 month at a time. Or if you have students that want to host a booth at a community event, or what those types of things look like should be clearly defined. So when you make your asks, you have the information to be able to tell people, well, this is going to take X amount of hours of your time, or this is a one-time ask versus a ongoing 6 months ask. It'll make a big difference on how quickly you're able to fill your campaign committee spots if you can have those types of things already planned out and easily definable. And if you can celebrate some small successes along the way, it will help you gain momentum. And that's why having those bite-sized specific chunks, sometimes they're referred to as SMART goals, that will actually give you a lot more leverage to continue to build that momentum as you get closer to your end game, or the end of the timeline where the decision will be made. Also consider how you might involve the media and coordinate messaging. Do you have any community champions for your issue that maybe are already affiliated with the media? I'd like to think I had a lot of foresight years ago when I stole Andrew from KFYR TV, but mostly I just liked him and he interviewed really well. But having some of those people around your table when you're building out your campaign committee that have a little bit of media savvy or past experience or connections to people who have those things might be something to think about. And then as you coordinate your messaging, making sure that you have written out on paper, planned talking points, messaging goals or activities that will align with some of the other campaign activities that you're creating, so that you constantly are having educational information coincide with your activities. A lot of times people have to hear the same messaging over and over before it will sink in. Way long time ago in a previous life, I worked retail management for a number of years. And I learned during that time that on average, a person needs to hear something approximately 7 times for it to register and sink in and be memorable. And so having that coordinated messaging, having those defined talking points will help those messaging to stick with people's minds better and longer and easier. And that will sway your general public in a way that having a one-off or having kind of everybody doing their own thing will. Does your campaign need funding for expenses? This can be a tricky question for a lot of campaign committees and coalitions, to be honest. Do you need to fundraise? Do you need to cover things out of pocket? Are you asking volunteers to contribute any money to this? If yes, how is that going to look? How will any money needed that isn't covered beyond the goodness of people's hearts on the committee going to be raised? Do you have to have a donation drive? Do you have to sell something, whether it be, campaign merchandise, buttons, hats, swag, whatever that might look like? The answer to some of this might be no. Maybe none of that is needed. Maybe it's just a pure messaging and grassroots building type of campaign committee. But if you're going to do any traditional media advertising, if you're going to have to pay to rent spaces, or booths or things like that, maybe, for instance, at the state fair or some of the other things that go on in any given community, that does cost money. And so you will want to consider that early on, because fundraising doesn't happen overnight either. Unless you have a benefactor that's personally vested in your issue or campaign, it is something you're going to want to consider and start earlier rather than later. And that's another area of expertise that Andrew and I can certainly help give you some ideas on. Since we've had to do fundraising over the years ourselves, and we've sold memberships and we've sold swag and things like that. And so we can certainly give you some ideas on what that could look like if you think it would be needed for your local issue. And then at the end of the day, how will we measure our success? And I just see now I have that on here twice, so it must be super important. um, is our success the actual vote or outcome of a meeting or ballot? Or is our success based on how many people we get involved in our campaign or our issue? And I think that we can celebrate successes in a number of different ways, even if a vote doesn't go our way the first time. And even if it does go our way the first time, sometimes celebrating that success and recapping what occurred over the course of many, many months helps define what we need to do for next steps. Because sometimes even when you win, you haven't won yet, if that makes sense. And my example of that is we had to face that cigar bar bill 3 times. And the first 2 times we did defeat it, but we always knew it was going to come back again and again and again. We knew that those folks weren't going to give up. And so defining our success, even when we were celebrating our wins those first 2 times, also meant mapping out and planning for the future and knowing that we were going to have to face that issue again. And some issues don't go away. And so as you're creating your campaign committee, keep in mind that it might ebb and flow. You might really ramp it up for a short time frame and have a really clear end goal, but you also might have it plateau or even kind of level off or ebb off for a while until you have to reevaluate and reestablish it all over again if that issue comes back. And so it can be cyclical in nature, and you'll want to consider that as you're inviting people to the table too, so that they know this might not be a one and done, or this might be something that, down the road you come and ask of them again, and if they'd be willing to consider that, so that you know upfront as you're making your long-term plans versus short-term plans. So I'm going to give you all a few minutes, and this would be a great time for questions. If you have questions too, Abby, like I said, I can't see the screen, so you'll have to let me know if any are already popping up. But take a sheet of paper, and if you already have an issue in mind or know that one is facing your community, take about 5 minutes here and just answer a few of these questions, or jot down a few notes based on these categories. Identify your local campaign issue. Write down if you have a timeline that you're going to need to follow. Is it weeks away, months away, sometime next year? Because then we can plot points throughout that timeline of your different goals and activities and planning stages to make it into more manageable chunks for you. You're going to also create kind of a loose outline of what your campaign committee or coalition might look like. So you might define that mission or issue. You might suggest the type of structure you want to follow. You might already start thinking about who would hold seats around the table or who you might be reaching out to. And then clearly state your end goal. Is it a vote? Is it purely educational in nature and you'll be happy once you've educated 5,000 people? Is it something completely different than that? Is it more coalition based where you're just building out the number of organizations you collaborate and partner with in your community, gearing up for a just in case scenario? Maybe you don't have a specific problem or issue already in your community, but you're planning ahead because you anticipate one. And then also plan some time after the vote or after your end goal has been met to kind of recap and celebrate and then look ahead to the future. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for just a few minutes. We'll give about 5 minutes. I'll kind of clock the time here. And then Abby, if any questions come up during these 5 minutes, shout them out and let me know.
There was one request to have your slides shared. So I just wanted to confirm
Yes,
that you were fine.
definitely.
Okay.
Yes,
I
definitely. I'll make sure
figured I
Abby
was going to
gets
answer for you, and then I figured I better double check. So yes,
Yeah,
we will be
always
sending
and
those out.
forever, TFND slides will be free for use and editing.
Perfect. And then also about the recording. And I did pop the link into the TFND webpage where all these resources are kept and maintained by them. So you should always be able to rewatch. And if you miss it or anything like that, that is where they are located. So
Excellent. Thanks, Abby.
that is all I saw in the chat at this time. And I don't see any hands up. So I will
Okay.
let you do your work.
All right. We will do 5 minutes starting now.
So this is maybe this is Cindy Schmidt from Devil's Lake, and I am maybe I'm so new to everything, but when I'm listening to you visiting about the coalition and things, I'm really, the schools have really been supportive this year in me coming in, and I've had schools reaching out to me. So I feel like that would be a good place to start for me with some things, because they're realizing what a big problem that we have, and I think they would be great partners. So that's kind of where I'm at with some of that. So those would be, I don't, like even getting something started, like inviting them. We did invite the superintendent to a coalition team that we currently have in prevention, but it's not specifically tobacco. And I think that we could really have a specific prevention coalition around tobacco with what we're seeing in our local counties. And so how would a person, like, do you have advice to like get that started?
Sure,
and I know that's very broad, but
well, I think you're already on the right page, Cindy, and I think you've already performed some of the first steps, and it's simply just inviting people to the table with you. And so host a meeting with interested or vested, parties. So your superintendent, maybe the principals of the schools in your community, maybe the school counselors or some teachers or parents, of course, and just have maybe a lunch and learn style meeting, or evening coffee and donuts or something like that, and just have them come for a half hour to an hour and learn a little bit about you and who you are and what you're hoping to accomplish. And then you can learn a little bit about them and what their needs are and how you can help or how they can help you. And I think just getting that conversation going will help start the ball rolling.
okay.
It
And
doesn't
so
have to be complicated. It just needs to get started, if that makes sense. Sometimes taking that very first step is the most intimidating and hardest part of all of this. And
yeah,
I think we tend to overthink it sometimes. I know I have in the past. And sometimes it's just a very simple of, we've identified this issue, and I think it will be great for us to get together and talk about it.
okay. Yeah, I think I just have been hesitant because I am so new, but as I've gotten out into the schools, I've gotten built a lot of relationships just in the last 6 months. And I'm like, I feel like I'm kind of at that spot where there's a huge need. They're looking into wanting to incorporate curriculum and all of those things. And I'm just like, okay, I feel like I'm at that spot where there needs to be another step besides relationship building and trust kind of going forward.
Now it's time to meet. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you're right. You've identified that now you've done the kind of groundwork. Now it's time to get everybody to the table to see what those next steps might be. And if they're already looking at curriculum, this is your opportunity to influence what curriculums they look at.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. I just needed a little validation. Yeah. Thank you.
Definitely. Does anyone else have questions or something to share?
There is an item in the chat asking if anyone has any talking points that we could address in these meetings.
Talking points for what issue? Everybody's issue might look a little bit different. So maybe we can collaborate and develop several different sets depending on the issue. If you're talking about indoor smoke-free air law, we, TFND, have tons of talking points that we can share and have shared in the past. And so those you don't have to reinvent the wheel on. But if there's another issue that you want, either type that in the chat or let us know and we can help develop something for sure. Or if others already have something, maybe we can create kind of a sharing opportunity or a Google document to put those in.
Looks like the request is for vaping in schools.
Vaping in schools. Okay. I'm going to make a note of that. TFND, when I say we, that's TFND does not have ready-made vaping in schools. And I assume it's to deter vaping in schools. And what those talking points might look like. So that might take a little bit of a one-on-one conversation with us so that we can hear a little bit more about what your needs and what you're experiencing are. That would help us develop out some specific talking points for you. And then we can hopefully add some generalized one that maybe everybody could use.
So I have a couple thoughts or ideas, things that we have kind of ruminating
Sure,
here in
who's
Grand
talking?
Forks. This is
Grand
Nicole.
Forks. Hey,
Nicole
Nicole.
Benson from Grand Forks. Hi. So one of the things that we talked about is the retail education on the T29, but really trying to do a campaign around highlighting those retailers that pass the compliance check. So kind of a campaign around that, just kind of positively enforce, like these are the ones that have passed.
That's
So maybe
awesome.
so some opportunity to educate those retailers prior to the compliance, and then also letting them know that we are going to be highlighting those retailers that have passed the compliance and kind of giving them shout outs and acknowledging that.
Nicole, I love that type of campaign. I'm a firm believer in positivity reinforces action that we want to see. And so I like that you're highlighting those that have passed and are doing it right versus trying to shame or call out those that have failed or made a mistake. I always think people want to join the winning side of things. And so I love that campaign. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Heather, can
Kayla
I
has her
just,
hand up. Brady, I'm going to interrupt you because Kayla's had her hand up for a while. Let her go and then I'll call on you next.
Sorry. Another thing I kind of have an idea on too that we're seeing quite a bit, and even it's helping with some of our buy-in with our parents, with educating youth is there a way, I know that that's still kind of in the air with brain development and finding the research and just digging deep into some of this with how it can impact the brain development at such a young age as the brain is still developing, to even third hand smoke and digging deep into finding some research on that, which is still evolving as well. I don't know if that's something to think about too with campaigning for local areas. I definitely know that seems to help a little bit when we're talking to parents on how when kiddos see you utilizing this as your outlet to cope with your stressors, it kind of impacts those youth at such a young age. And then tying it in with that brain development too, because a lot of them don't know that brain development, the brain is still developing until 25. And when we're introducing these things at such a young age, it can start re-hardwiring the brain. So I don't know if that's something for an idea too.
So in terms of like adding those types of educational tidbits, if you will, to your messaging for your campaign. So if your campaign is to educate your community on the dangers of vaping, your talking points should maybe include some evidence-based statistics from either the CDC or another reputable national organization. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Great. Go ahead now, Brady. Sorry about that.
all right, I'm not raising my hand as I'm driving on the interstate here. So I just wanted to, regarding the vaping questions and talking points, Heather's and Andrew's TFND vaping presentation that they have would provide tons of talking points for people to use if they're able to get in there and review that vaping presentation. That's all I was at.
Awesome. Thank you for the shout out, Brady. I really appreciate you highlighting that we already have some of those resources available. Thank you. Perfect. And what he's referencing is shared on our website. And if you are having a hard time finding it on our website, just shoot Andrew or I an email and we'll send you a direct link or send you the PowerPoint file itself. Any other questions or thoughts before we continue on? Okay, here we go. So this is still, and maybe you've already done some of this now that we've been talking through and spending some additional time here, but these are just the next couple slides are slides I wanted in this deck so that you can use it as some planning documentation, because I figured we would be sharing it at the end. And so here's where you can actually start to map out some further details, like I told you we would talk about. So listing out people and organizations that might be interested in your issue. And it doesn't just have to be health-related organizations or school-related organizations. It can be a lot of times some of your local businesses that are super well respected and have historically been community champions in your in your areas or your communities. It can be parent-led organizations or student-led organizations, or maybe youth serving organizations like church groups or your local Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, or other service type organizations that need projects to fulfill volunteer hours. And so you can kind of get creative and think a little bit outside of the box when you're looking at who you might invite to collaborate or coordinate with you. And then same thing goes when you're talking about who has different skills or resources. Who's really good at public speaking that you might know, who has a knack for creativity that could maybe take some of our messaging points and design a social media ad, who might just have maybe they have a lot of kids, nieces, nephews that they care a lot about, and so their personal passion is different than somebody who is more organizational based. And so as you think about who you're inviting, don't limit yourself, don't prejudge. You just never know where people are going to come from and have a passion. And then also really think about who we can help. As you invite people around the table, we shouldn't always be self-centric. Think about who our campaign committee or who our coalition can serve. And we've already talked a little bit about that and how we want to serve the schools and parents in our community better. So are there other opportunities for service that we can bring some value to, and who we can have around the table that can benefit from our issue succeeding, or our committee forming, and then make that outreach as well. And then as you have these seats fill up, this is where you can really define out who has what responsibility and what role to play. And you can define that out either very loosely or very formally, depending on the structure that you've chosen as you build your campaign committee. But I've always been very upfront with people when it comes to how much time we're asking them to commit, because that's usually people's number one concern when being invited to participate in something like this. Well, how much time is it going to take? Because all of us are busy. All of us fill up our days and evenings, whether it be with our kids' activities or our own, or maybe we're already overextended and are just looking for a reason to take on one less thing. So be very upfront with what your ask is as you're defining out roles and responsibilities, is my biggest piece of advice I can give you. And then the activities. This is where we've talked in the past, and we've shared several lists over the years of different types of campaign activities, educational activities. Even the PowerPoint Brady just referenced has some ideas for activities, and making a list of your first 3 things and who you're targeting with those 3 things will make life a whole lot easier as you get rolling, and it will give you guys something to work on and have some early success with. And again, make them simple and bite-sized. Maybe the first thing is simply writing out your talking points and messaging points. We don't have to overcomplicate this or do big, huge community projects right off the bat. All of your activities will kind of build off of each other. And so maybe your very first thing is getting those talking points or messaging points, on paper. Maybe your very second thing is, having every single person that showed up to your first meeting bring a friend to your second meeting. You want to grow your numbers and expand out your reach. And so that's going to be a key ask for you to make. And that should be a planned activity. Ongoing. It shouldn't be a one and done so that you stagnate. You want to continue to get fresh perspectives and fresh relationships on your committees and coalitions. Maybe your third activity is, writing a letter to the editor, or, building a social media post. It doesn't have to be a beautiful, ad that's, graphically designed and in full color. It can just be a simple social media post letting people know that this campaign has formed or this coalition exists, and have that be one of your initial activities. And so I guess my advice here is to Think bite-sized, especially in the beginning, and let it build off of itself over time, culminating in some of the bigger community projects like hosting a booth or collecting signatures or having, participating in a prevention day or doing something up at the Capitol, or in front of your city council or in front of the park board or school board or whatever that might look like, or bringing students to the Break Free Youth Summits. But your early activities especially should help garner some successes for you to build off of and keep that momentum going. Because if you have it overcomplicated too early on, as we've already heard, it can be overwhelming and you can have, kind of project paralysis, if you will. And so really having those initial goals be attainable and achievable will be vital. Decision makers, informing our decision makers, and who they are varies depending on what issue and depending on where you live and what you're working on. Of course, we know state and local legislators are big decision makers for a lot of what TFND works on, but for you all, it probably is your city commissioners or your county commissioners or your park board or your school board or your mayor. And so looking at that, but also decision makers are teachers and parents and, business folks in your community and other organizers and coalitions. So understanding sometimes you might have to do some initial legwork with those people and get their buy-in before you go to the actual, governmental type decision makers, and figuring out the best way to reach out to them, whether it's, letters, emails, in person, public hearings, phone calls. All of that can look a little bit different depending on who it is. And so just understand that you might have to customize your approach more often than not, until you figure out what works best for you and the style that you like to work best in. Maybe you're not comfortable writing letters, to the editor, or letters of support, or long emails. Maybe you're not a writer. Maybe you do better verbally and meeting in person is your jam, and you feel most comfortable when you can just talk and have dialogue back and forth on a phone call or in person. And you'll kind of figure out your style as you get going. And then as you work around the table with your coalition members or campaign committee members, everybody might be a little bit different. You can leverage your strengths in different ways. Then if you've got people that love to write, let them do that. Don't make them get on the phone. If you have people that have the gift of gab, embrace that and put them in one-on-one meetings with people to help build your coalition or to help influence some of your people that you want to educate in this tobacco prevention world. Don't, make them write social media posts. And so kind of looking at each person's strengths and leveraging that to your best advantage will be key. And then doing your homework before all of this. Like I said, have your talking points ready to go as one of your very early activities. Have discussion around the table over who's going to be doing what, so you don't double up and both contact the same exact person on the same exact day. Not that you don't want to layer your approach and contact these people more than once. You can and you should, but it shouldn't be inundating. You don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to blast them. I know that might sound counterintuitive because TFND does do some of that blasting during the legislative session, where we coordinate and we contact all of our legislators all on the same day ahead of a vote. That's a little bit different. In your local communities, for your local initiatives, I think you might want to be a little bit more nuanced, at least until it comes up to the day of the decision. Then maybe if you have city commissioners that you need to have a lot of people contact all at once, that would be appropriate. But as you're educating and approaching it from your early stages, make it more personable and relatable if you can. Utilizing media, Andrew has a great webinar on exactly this. So you can reference TFND's website and pull up that recording. It was probably, 8 months or so ago. It's in the list. It's media for local initiatives, I think is the title, if I remember right. But he's got a great recording on that you can reference and utilize. You can pull some information from these slides, but just know that utilizing media, whether it be radio interviews or your local paper versus one of the big regional papers, sometimes can have really great outreach and effect, because, in smaller communities especially, that's what they gravitate toward. They want to support those media resources, or they constantly listen to their local person that they know that it's in that realm. And so you can really use that to your advantage. Social media is where our young people tend to shine. So if you have youth on your coalition or on your campaign committee, let them. We had several of them do takeovers of TFND's social media pages during the Breakthrough Youth Summits in Bismarck and Fargo this last fall, and it was really cool to see the students shine. We legitimately just gave them our logins and let them run our pages for the day, and their posts were awesome and they loved it and they were good at it. And so let them be. It's for sure not my realm. Andrew's pretty good at it. But our young people, man, they live and breathe this day in and day out. And so letting them amplify your message or your campaign and get involved in that way will, let them feel like they're really a true part of your campaign and being a leader in their community. And it will hopefully benefit your messaging hitting completely different audiences than what it would be able to if you were doing it yourself or just by yourself. Not that you can't do it too, but you understand what I'm saying. I hope having those young people really shine in an area where they tend to be the experts is only going to benefit everybody. Letters to the editor seem pretty old school these days, I will admit, but they do still have a place in our advocacy work. They do still have good outreach, and they can put to paper something that can last over time. It can be found and referenced over and over again, same as a TV interview or radio interview can be. And so I don't think that we should skip out on this as one of our activities or steps. And just leverage a few of those people that like to write or that are good at writing, and keep it brief, keep it concise and pertinent, and making sure that some of your talking points end up in there verbatim, word for word, is key also, to keep that messaging amplified and moving forward. And then here's where, kind of the fun can happen, the different activism projects, community projects, whether it's school with the youth or, community with the youth, or just the coalition as a whole. It doesn't have to be youth centric. It can be really educationally based, whether there's already events going on in your community that you can host booths at with some interesting materials or activities for people to or visuals for people to see, or whether it is, you can see some of the flagging of the litter in the parks, you can see some of the post-it campaigns, you can see some of the, sign-on postcards and things that we've asked for in the past. And so just be creative. And this is another area where young people tend to shine because they have a lot of creativity left in them, and utilize that to help get your messages out there. So where can you focus your energy? We've already talked a little bit about the vaping epidemic today based on some of the questions and comments that have been shared. And so definitely a campaign committee focused around educating on the dangers of vaping and on the epidemic in our schools that a lot of our local schools are facing with our kids coming to school with these products and showing dependence already to these products is certainly an area, but I also want to continue to drum the beat or beat the drum for our three-legged stool for tobacco prevention policies. And as you know, North Dakota has a very unsteady, non-existent stool. Basically, we do still have a strong smoke-free air law. Don't get me wrong, but it's not perfect anymore. And so that green check mark is a little faded green, in my opinion, until we can get that cigar exemption back off the books. We had the strongest law in the nation. It had been cited by our Surgeon General as model policy, and we want to get that back. And so our strong smoke-free air law needs to get back to being the strongest it can be. Tobacco taxes, tobacco increase, vaping taxes, vaping increase, however you want to frame that. That is a leg of the stool that TFND continues to talk about and work on. And also our comprehensive tobacco prevention funding. That took some pretty serious hits back in 2017 and 2019, and we're still nowhere near to where we were before those hits took place. We did have a small reinstatement this last session for 2023, and that was something to celebrate for sure, but there's a long way to go in making sure that we have the resources and tools and funding needed to do this work at CDC best practice recommended levels in North Dakota. And so we'll continue to highlight that as part of our policy initiatives, and we can do that locally too. The more education that goes out, it does trickle up to the state legislature. If you have communities that are very educated and well versed on what good tobacco prevention policy or promising practices look like, that does help us when it comes to making our case up at the Capitol too. So it does build off of itself. This again is what we had done for one of our last campaigns, some of our talking points that we use, just as an example for you to see when you frame your talking points, you want to possibly reference if you have community or have had community votes on it in the past, what those votes were and how successful they were, what percentages they were. You want to reference what is currently on the books versus what you would like to see on the books if you're looking for policy language change. You do want to always, in my opinion, highlight that when we talk about the dangers of tobacco products and tobacco prevention policy, we are not talking about ceremonial or traditional tobacco. We are talking about commercial tobacco. And especially depending on where you live, that could be vitally important for you to differentiate from, because you don't want to offend key segments of people that could potentially be involved in helping your campaign committee or coalition. And so highlighting that we are talking about commercial tobacco when we talk about tobacco prevention policy is very important in my opinion. And then giving some reference on why things should be changed or how they can be changed or what you're waiting on for that change could be another kind of nuance that you incorporate into your talking points or messaging as well. So these are just a few examples of how we frame that when we're looking at creating talking points. And then this is, again, some history on more detailed talking points, I guess, if you will. We gave the history of what we were up against and why we were still working on it. And so now we've shifted gears for our Protect Indoor Smoke-Free Air Law kind of messaging. Before it was all about defeating the bill. And now we give the timeline and the context so that we can move the fight to the local lines, really. We need help getting city ordinances on the book so that they take precedence over state law, and that communities that don't want cigar lounges to open up in their communities can have that ordinance preventing them. And so that's TFND's new messaging talking point that we've enacted since April of 2023 when we saw that bill go through. So I guess that's just an example of how your talking points can change over time, but the overall arching message needs to stay the same. And then again, here's just some more ideas on why we're asking you to do this, what you can do about whatever your issue might be. This was what we had put out in the world when we were looking at protecting indoor smoke-free air law, and we were advocating and asking people to help us do so. So this was a slide that we had in every presentation for 18 months. This is what our slide looked like. This is what our ask at the end of every presentation was as we traveled across the state, talking to schools, to conferences, to business groups, to whoever. And that's a recommendation I would give to you, is every time you go anywhere, have a slide or have a small sized handout that gets your kind of main points home and has your ask basically, so that people know how they can get involved and how they can help. Because so often I hear from people the reason that they don't help or don't get involved is because nobody has asked them. And so just being that person to ask or having that slide to help remind you to ask or do the ask for you can really open a lot of doors to getting more people involved. So that concludes my slide deck. I am going to ask if there are any more questions. We can have some more open discussion if people are interested in that, or I can gift you back some time today. This took us about an hour. And so if there's no questions or people that don't have much to share, we can close out the session a little bit early. But I do see a few hands up now that I've taken my share screen off. So let's go ahead and get started. Abby, I'll let you drive the show.
Sounds good. Sue, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Heather, could you share with us a story about when you ended your PowerPoint slide? You know, you had that last slide asking for different things. Just a story about a response that you got from somebody who volunteered.
Sure. Actually, just most recently, we had our North Dakota High School Student Council Conference that Andrew and I presented at. We were in front of around 300 or so high school students over the course of 3 breakout sessions. And that is a slide at the end of our youth presentations as well as our adult presentations. And every single breakout session had several students come up to us and share with us either what they were working on in their schools already or asking for support from TFND. And actually just this week, I had one of them follow back around with me, and I'm not sure if she's on the call or not. She can maybe validate this for me. But one of the students, we had told them we would send them some swag so they could do some prizes at an upcoming booth that they're hosting in their school. And so next week, we'll be sending some TFND gear up to Minot for one of the students that came up to us and talked to us. And so again, it's that ask and that giving of ideas on how they can participate and make a difference with what they're already doing, or if they're not doing anything, it gives them ideas on what to do. Thanks for that question, Sue. That's a fun one. Another example is after the dental conference, when that slide came up, I did have several from our partners in that community come up and say that they want me to give them some outreach when it comes time to working at the Capitol again, because they're very interested in talking to their personal legislators because they were pretty fired up.
Do you ever do any follow through with like sharing whoever those students were or those dental offices with the local public health units to help expand our local coalitions?
I have not in the past, Sue, but I can certainly try and do that going forward.
Be great.
Yeah, you bet. Great questions. Anybody else have anything to ask or share? This can be open dialogue time too. Just making some notes.
Jennifer, go ahead.
So talking about cigar bar openings. And so I again have spoke with the one gentleman that does want to open up a cigar bar here. And then I had a great conversation with him, and he said, well, I expected you to call, so that's good. And then I called our city attorney to ask her what, if anything, is going forward, because I guess, sometimes that's how city councils work, is they just, of course, aren't going to let you know when they've got something going on. And she just said that nothing has come across her desk yet.
Okay.
So I guess that's kind of what's going on here. And I'm kind of anticipating or wondering what my next ask should be, also to let everyone know, of course, we have monthly coalition meetings where I continually bring that up and ask for support or guidance, but any, suggestions or input on next steps?
Sure,
Thank
Jennifer.
you.
And I love that you're being so proactive with your city attorney and your potential cigar lounge owner. I think that's fantastic that he was expecting your call. That means you're doing your work and getting that community educated. So nice work there. And I think that's great that you're keeping on top of your city attorney, so that hopefully if you call proactively enough times, when something does come across their desk, they will reach out to you. I mean, fingers crossed. I know that doesn't always happen, but at least it wouldn't be a foregone conclusion. I think next steps would be, if you have any opportunity or appetite in your community to revisit your local ordinance to prevent or exclude cigar bars from your community. I mean, I know that that's an uphill battle because we have been working on that at the state level for a long, long time. But that would be one next step. If you have any opportunity to get that language to prevent the lounge from opening, that would be my personal recommendation. That would entail probably a fairly big educational campaign, and advocacy with your city commissioners. And so your local coalition would definitely need to be tapped for that. And if there's not appetite for that, I think continuing to educate on what types of regulations and parameters you can put in place through ordinance to limit what that shop is able to do or where it's able to be located would also be another good next step to make it as difficult and as hard for them to operate as you can, because we don't want them located next to children's facilities. We don't want them in a multi-unit housing complex, as a base unit. We don't want them in anywhere where there's shared walls, or the secondhand smoke can be even more detrimental than it will be for the patrons and maintenance crew and workers that have to go into an establishment like that already. And so looking at those types of regulations and prevention measures that you can get in place would be secondary to just outright making sure that it couldn't open in your community. Does that answer your question in a roundabout way?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And a great resource for some of that in the cigar bar world is Brady and Becky at Great Plains Public Health. They just went through this fall. TFND worked alongside them and tried to support them as best we could, but they led the charge in their community of Mandan for this work. And they did share a lot of their personal experience on a call that was hosted by Sue and Becky last year. I think it was in November, if I'm right. And they had awesome advice and expertise to share. And so you could always reach back around to them as well as to Andrew and I.
We'd be willing to answer questions that anybody contact us.
Thanks, Brady. I appreciate that. You guys really went through the ringer.
Yeah, and what Jennifer was saying, or what you were saying with those shared walls, childcare facilities, stuff like that. I think cities are generally, or people who are going to be writing those ordinances are generally very concerned about that type of thing. Our, Mandan, they added a lot of language into their ordinance that we wanted added, and they had no problem doing it, but they just don't know that information. So the only other thing I'd add is that people need to, TFND or any other organization around the state or national partners are not going to know you're going through any of these changes unless you let them know about them. They're not just out there, some of them are monitoring what's going on, but if you have issues going on in your town or community or county, whatever, you need to let people know so they can help.
Thank you for that, Brady. Yes, 100%. Please invite us in. We try our best to, like Brady said, monitor what's going on, but we don't know what we don't know. So yeah, if you can invite us in and loop us into whatever you're needing, however we can support you, and we can help, create that gateway to the nationals if you don't have that already, or they can reach around to us. Just the more of us that can get involved and collaborate and help you, the better. Last call for questions. Any other comments? All right. Well, I really appreciate the time this morning, Abby. Thanks for being such a great partner on the webinar series, as always. If you do have additional follow-up that are needed, don't hesitate to reach out to Abby or myself or Andrew. I will make sure my slides get over to Abby this morning that she can share with everybody. And then if you want to line up, one-on-one counseling sessions or support calls, we are happy to provide that service as well and let you pick our brains and ask whatever customized or individualized questions you might have for your specific issue or community. Don't hesitate to reach out and get on our calendars for that too. But thanks for your attention this morning. I hope it was helpful, and we look forward to visiting again next month.
Great, thank you. And watch for the notification for our February webinar. That'll be coming out soon. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.